Afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our Committee on Appropriations report for this afternoon. At this time, we'll ask the clerk to take the roll, please.
And we have 22 people present. We do have a quorum. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and committee, good afternoon. Today we meet to consider amendments to House Bill 29, which is the current biennium budget, and to House Bill 30, which is the budget for the upcoming 2024 through 2026 biennium. Although we have a record number of new members in the House this year, I'm lucky to have an Appropriations Committee largely full of veterans. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the committee members for stepping up to the plate, ensuring continuity, and developing a solid amendment package. While much has changed, let me say from the start, one principle remains the same. The Appropriations Committee strives to develop a fiscally responsible budget that focuses on meeting our citizens' needs. Last month, I set out 6 core priorities for this year's new budget. Number 1, providing compensation increases for all groups of employees. Number 2, ensuring college remains accessible and affordable for Virginia students. Number 3, increasing teacher pay to the national average and advancing equity in school funding to ensure all students can succeed. Number 4, supporting the strategic investment in health and human resources to address the mental health and opioid crisis and the needs of the DD waiver population. Number 5, continuing our commitment to environmental protection. And number 6, finally, making prudent use of available cash and debt to address our capital maintenance backlog and construction needs. This committee's amendment package makes significant investment in each of these key priorities while maintaining fiscal responsibility. As Governor Youngkin stated when he introduced the budget in December, and I quote, "Our sales and use tax base is substantially more narrow than our peer states. We will modernize and address these problems by first closing the big tax loophole on digital goods to include them as part of the sales tax base," unquote. On this, the governor was correct. In 2000, sales tax applied to fully 50% of customer expenditures nationally. According to the Tax Foundation, in 2021, that figure has fallen by 40% to less than 30% of purchases. The budget amendment package before you retains the governor's proposal to extend the sales tax to digital transactions. It makes no sense to pay sales tax when you buy a Blu-ray disc, but don't pay a tax when you download the same movie from a digital retailer. I strongly believe it is our responsibility to adequately compensate our public employees. The House has provided significant raises in recent years. That does not mean we can now rest on our laurels. Just to ensure a wage gains are not lost to inflation, the committee is proposing a 3% raise in each year of the biennium for state and state-supported local employees. Similarly, to ensure Virginia's teachers are paid at least at the national average by the end of the next biennium, the amendments included raises to 3.38% each year for our educators. There has been much discussion about public education over the years. We recognize that many of the JLOC recommendations point to systemic problems with our K-12 funding model. That said, it would be premature to make wholesale changes without further review. The committee decided to focus on 3 key items that we all agree need to be addressed. These are improving teacher pay and using evidence-based methods to distribute funding for at-risk students and English language learners, thus ensuring that all students receive the support they need to succeed in life. In the area of higher education, a secular largely ignored in the introduced budget, today's package builds on the House's continued commitment to prioritize affordable access and degree production. It includes $205 million over the biennium to allow institutions to limit in-state undergraduate tuition increases and increase degree production in high-demand fields. We also provide over $50 million to the community college system to increase workforce credentials in 6 key industry sectors. Health and human resources remain one of the most critical areas of need in the Commonwealth's budget. I am pleased that the introduced budget authorizes an additional 3,440 DD waiver slots. Unfortunately, simply providing DD slots does not guarantee services. This budget will retain those slots and also increase rates of pay for personal care attendance to ensure there's not just an available slot, but services for those in need. The committee also is recommending more than $457 million for mental health and substance abuse services. This goes beyond the recommendation in the introduced budget, which focused on crisis care and adds funding to ensure community services are available to provide a continuity of care after the initial crisis has been resolved. Because of high care forward balances in recent years, we have been able to fully fund our capital program with cash. While we do not have the same level of flexibility this year, it continues to be imperative to address deferred maintenance and prior project commitments to avoid higher prices caused by delays in projects that are fully funded and ready to move to construction. Although we continue to avoid adding higher cost new projects to the 6-year plan, we must not lose our focus on tackling maintenance and renovation needs. In total, the budget has $1.7 billion in general fund supported capital, only about a third of which is tax supported debt. We stay well below the conservative $1 billion plus of annual debt capacity recommended by the Debt Capacity Advisory Committee. To not steal the thunder of our individual subcommittee reports, I will now leave the details to them. We will begin with Delegate Rasul and the recommendations of the Public Education Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The Elementary and Secondary Committee, with amazing staff, faced two major challenges this year. First, the JLARC report suggested major changes to how we fund our schools. And second, ensuring that our youngest learners continue to have success to educational opportunities after the federal dollars disappear post-pandemic. Mr. Chairman, I'm excited to announce that the subcommittee rose to the challenge and present to you today a budget investing almost $2.6 billion in public education and early childhood, including $969 million to fully fund the cost of rebenchmarking the SOQs for the next biennium, and for school divisions, a $940.3 million increase when compared to the introduced budget. First and foremost, we recognize our education system relies on our great teachers. So we included $628.2 million to implement a 4-year plan that the Commonwealth will use to increase teacher pay beyond the national average by providing 2 3 3/8% pay increases at the start of each fiscal year. In conjunction with the legislation passed earlier this session, we will stay on track to meet this milestone by 2028. For our students at risk falling behind academically, we propose $384.6 million to comprehensively and strategically reform the way the state provides funding to support these at-risk students by rising up to date the data and increasing the size of this fund by over 30%. This makes major strides to address one of JLARC's key recommendations and will provide much-needed resources to support these students. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, English language learners are one of the fastest-growing segments of the student population. And also, their needs vary greatly depending on their prior education experiences and English acquisition. To match academic supports with these students, we recommend $95.1 million over the biennium to shift to a model where a teacher-to-staff ratio is based on the level of English as a second language and how it is mastered. Finally, for our littlest learners, Mr. Chairman, Virginia was in danger of losing roughly 35,000, roughly half of the funded early childhood slots available for lower income families, as the federal funding will soon disappear. As such, I'm proud to present $418.1 million plan that will ensure that these slots are maintained and even provide some room for expansion, Mr. Chairman, all without increasing the financial burden on working families in the Commonwealth. Within this plan, we also propose an innovative public-private partnership to provide up to a 25% state match for employers willing to cost share the cost of child care within their workforce. Mr. Chairman, I now ask the committee staff to explain our subcommittee's recommendations in more detail. I hope it will be the pleasure of the committee to adopt our report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The House budget includes if I could have the slides, please. The House budget provides $2.56 billion in additional spending in K-12 and early childhood. Localities and school divisions will see an increase of $2 billion compared to. All right, now we have the slides. So the House budget includes $2.56 billion in additional spending in K-12 and early childhood. Localities and school divisions will see an increase of $2 billion when compared to Chapter 1. As you can see here, about half of that increase is resulting from rebenchmarking updates and the other half from the House's K-12 policy proposals, and then the other $418 million directed to early childhood education. Focusing on the K-12 portion of this package, screens went down. Focusing on the K-12 part of this package, this slide provides detail on the proposed spending, most of which I'll cover in the subsequent slides. In total, there's about $1.46 billion in additional general fund spending proposed, There's also about $690 million in additional non-general fund spending. And school division distributions in this package are about $1 billion above that provided in the introduced budget. $628 million is provided for the 2, 3, and 3/8% salary increases. As mentioned previously, this is the first 2 of 4 steps in the plan to increase the Virginia average to at least the national average. This slide demonstrates the methodology used to calculate our national salary goal for 2028 in the green line, with adjustments for inflation and the state proposed actions shown in purple, those actions that are needed to meet that goal. $384.6 million is provided to implement aspects of JLARC's recommendations related to the at-risk add-on. That includes ending the use of an outdated free lunch rate metric used to distribute the funds, as well as moving the at-risk into the SOQ and expanding the at-risk add-on rate. $95.1 million is included to provide more targeted supports for English learner students by transitioning to a tiered staffing model with the ratios demonstrated in this slide. Also in K-12, the House budget includes $61.2 million to implement reading specialist staffing standards in grades 4 through 8. There's $10 million proposed for planning and implementation of community schools projects, and $1.7 million in supplemental support to help Eastern Shore localities with salary misalignment issues. Moving into early childhood, the House proposes a $418 million increase in general funds. That's $74 million above the introduced bill. The bulk of this funding is provided to maintain child care slots after the federal funds expire, but also allow for some additional program growth. $36 million is included to maintain co-payments at their current levels, and $15 million is included to maintain the existing LCI cap that's applicable to the VPI program. And because House Bill 419 establishes the Early Childhood Care and Education Fund, allowing reallocation of funds between all of your early childhood programs, we can capture $160 million in savings by more accurately predicting VPI participation. And finally, in some other public education items, $9.3 million is proposed to develop a comprehensive literacy screener to replace the PALS screener. And $4.4 million is included to better support parents of students with disabilities and ensure that school personnel are equipped to support these students. And then there are some other actions proposed to address the transition to a new assessment system, provide access to mental health services, and to support our schools that aren't meeting accreditation standards. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that completes our report.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the report of the Elementary and Secondary Education Subcommittee.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept and adopt the report of the Education and Secondary Education Committee. Members, please cast your vote. I think this is a recorded vote. And reports 22-0. Thank you. Chairman Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It is no secret that Virginia is still facing a mental health crisis impacting children and adults all over the Commonwealth. Virginia has committed significant investments to our mental health system in recent years, but the subcommittee knows there is still more work to be done, which is why we are recommending over $457 million over the biennium to support behavioral health and substance abuse disorder services. We recommend adding nearly $55 million dedicated to crisis services to provide immediate support to individuals who need it most. This includes 1, developing more crisis receiving centers and crisis stabilization units, 2, further building out the Marcus Alert program by adding additional crisis co-responder teams, 3, expanding alternative transportation and custody programs, and 4, adding more mobile crisis teams throughout the state. While we know that it's critical to invest in crisis service, Mr. Chairman, we also need to be cognizant of where these individuals go once they're out of crisis, which is why the subcommittee recommends adding over $350 million in dedicated services to ensure individuals can get the support they need when they need it within their communities. We support providing an additional $12 million for discharge assistance planning for patients on the extraordinary barriers list to help ready individuals leave the hospital and to prevent rehospitalization. To help provide a place for individuals to go after leaving the hospital, we recommend bringing the annual funding amount for permanent supportive housing to $85.6 million to ensure individuals with serious mental illness have a safe and supportive place to live. Additionally, we recommend $9 million to bolster STEP Virginia, especially when it comes to outpatient services. The subcommittee also wanted to ensure children were receiving targeted services, which is why we're recommending $30 million to develop school-based health centers to provide mental health and primary medical care to students and their families within their school, preventing the need to find transportation to the doctor and taking off from school and work. We believe our investments in these initiatives will continue to improve our state's mental health system and allow more individuals to remain safe, supported, and healthy in their homes. In addition to behavioral health care, the subcommittee continued to focus on ensuring Medicaid developmental disability or DD waiver slots to grow and meet the needs of individuals on the Priority 1 waiting list. As you know, the introduced bill, as the chairman said, contains a proposal to fund 3,440 Priority 1 waiver slots over the biennium. This will be a great challenge for DMAS and DBHDS, and we are very sympathetic to that challenge. However, the subcommittee was concerned that our service providers may not have the capacity to absorb a large influx in demand for community-based services. Consequently, we are proposing a rational approach to providing the waiver slots over the biennium, phasing them in quarterly. In addition, we are providing a modest increase in DD waiver service rates to assist providers in serving these individuals. With this two-pronged approach, we expect to see the additional 3,440 individuals with a DD waiver slot and receiving services by the end of the biennium. Mr. Chairman, I would like to address the subcommittee's approach to funding the Medicaid program generally. We handled many worthy requests this session to expand Medicaid and to add services and to serve more individuals in the program. Forces have combined so that we need to use caution in expanding the program at this time. The program is in the middle of a huge transition as it works through the process of redetermining eligibility for 2 million Medicaid recipients whose eligibility has to be redetermined post-pandemic. While our state agencies have done a great job in managing this process, we are continuing to experience growing Medicaid rolls that were not anticipated when the Medicaid forecast was completed last November. This is putting pressure on our monthly program expenditures and is causing some concern until all cases are closed for those not meeting the program's eligibility criteria. In addition, Medicaid expenditures are facing potential upward increases as the agency completes this process to rebase hospital rates later this year. As a precautionary measure, then, we are recommending that we put $100 million in a reserve account against an expected increase in Medicaid expenditures. We're also recommending amendments aimed at implementing additional automated tools to assist in timely and accurate eligibility determinations and to streamline the application and renewal processes. The subcommittee's package also recommends funding to fulfill prior commitments that have been made by this body. First, the subcommittee recommends providing $138.7 million in total funds to fund the Medicaid impact of HB 1 passed by the House on February 2nd, which raises the minimum wage to $15 per hour by January 1, 2026. This funding will increase wages for consumer-directed personal care attendants that provide critical care that helps aged and disabled individuals to stay in their homes. The subcommittee report also includes $81.6 million to continue efforts to improve care in Virginia's nursing homes through our policy of basing payments on value. Nursing homes will have to earn a greater portion of their payments by improving performance in areas such as nursing hours, hospital admissions, outpatient emergency department visits, and other requirements. And finally, Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee is recommending $7 million for community health care centers and free clinics, $6.4 million to continue funding of our community health workers in local health districts, and $6.5 million for brain injury services and workforce retention efforts for these service providers. Subcommittee's report is contained in the attachment before you. Our terrific staff will review the report in more detail at this time, and I hope it will be the committee's pleasure to adopt the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just to remind you, on slide 11, House Bill 30, with the amendments before you, would include a net increase of $2.1 billion over the biennium for health and human resources. About 2/3 of that would be funding driven by mandated programs. I'm sorry, I need to advance the slide there. There we go. Is that? Oops. Other way? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm heading in the wrong direction here. So we'll start on this slide. You've seen it before. It's just your forecasts. Nothing has really changed on that one, and we'll go to the next slide on Medicaid spending. The one thing I think to keep in mind here is Medicaid spending. The subcommittee amendments before you would add about almost $400 million in funding to the Medicaid program. And the first two items in that slide there are recommended by the subcommittee, and they impact the Developmental Disability Waiver Program. In total, there's $255 million in general funds there. When you add that to the federal funds, which would match the spending for those first two items, you would get up to almost $528 million in spending. The bulk of that would be first for the DD waiver slots and the 3% rate increase each year for the waiver providers. And the second one would be for the impact of minimum wage on consumer-directed personal care attendance in the program. Amendments, as Delegate Sickles indicated, would set aside $100 million in a reserve fund. And then the funding for the nursing homes, again, that's $40 million general fund over the biennium to be matched by a like amount of federal dollars. And then there's a small amount, 7.9, for the local community-owned nursing homes, again, to be matched with federal dollars. There's some funding for the Children's Hospital, CHKD, small amount, totals about 5.4 over the biennium in general fund, again, to be matched with federal dollars. Going to the next slide, spending in the health department, there's about $24.4 million over the biennium for health workforce initiatives. One of these would expand the behavioral health loan repayment program. This would add some additional providers, child and adolescent psychiatric fellows, psychiatric RNs, and other mental health professionals that are not served by the program today. And then I would just point out to you that House Bill 1499, which involves the Virginia Health Workforce Development Authority, there's about $2.3 million there for them to match their federal HRSA grant and continue their operations. One other item I'd like to point out on that page does include its funding in medical, the Department of Medical Assistance Services. There's funding to add 20 psychiatry and 10 OBGYN graduate medical education residency slots. And then at the bottom of the page, in terms of the healthcare safety net, which Delegate Sickles indicated is the funding for community health workers, free clinics, and the federally qualified health centers. On the next page, I just want to point out there's some smaller spending items related to health screening and research, and a number of those have to do with bills that you passed this session. I'm not going to go through all those, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. And then finally, on the next slide, is funding for the Department in the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, again, for the brain injury community-based services of $5 million over the biennium, and health workforce retention initiatives for those providers. And then there's a small amount for some other projects on dementia care. I'll turn it over to Amy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Turning to behavioral health and developmental services, as Delegate Sickles stated, there's a proposed increase of over $457.4 million general fund over the biennium. There's $25 million in the first year and $2.6 in the second year to continue building out our comprehensive crisis infrastructure. We have $19.9 million general fund each year for salary increases at all of our state hospitals. We're also including $15 million general fund each year to develop school-based health clinics throughout the state. Continuing, we have $10.3 million in the first year and $9.8 million in the second year for children's mental health services. We have $10 million in one-time funds in the first year for additional mobile crisis teams, which will bring the statewide total to around 140. We have $6 million each year for additional discharge assistant planning for individuals who are on the extraordinary barriers list in interstate hospitals. We propose adding $5 million general fund each year for permanent supportive housing, bringing the annual total to over $85.6 million. We have $4.7 million general fund each year to expand alternative custody and alternative transportation services. And continuing to build out the Marcus Alert legislation, we have $3.6 million the first year and $4.2 in the second for crisis co-responder programs. And lastly on this slide, we're proposing $4.5 million each year to increase the STEP VA. Turning to the Department of Social Services, the proposed increase for the agency totals over $78.7 million general fund and $33 million non-general fund over the biennium. Out of this, we have $39.6 million dedicated to welfare programs and services. I won't go over all of these, but I will point out that we're adding $8.5 million in the first year and $8.4 in the second year to fund the relative maintenance payment program, as well as to support kinship care as opposed to foster care. Continuing on with DSS, there's $4.4 million general fund and $4.3 non-general fund the first year, as well as $12.5 million general fund and $12.3 million non-general fund the second year to fund the VA CMS replacement. This is the website where all individuals go to apply for public benefits, while also including $3.5 million general fund and $3.1 million non-general fund each year to increase the foster care and adoption COLA by 7%. We're also recommending funds in both years to standardize a training academy for local departments of social services, which will help with the workforce and recruitment and retention problems at local departments. Turning to the Opioid Abatement Authority, we have the base appropriation for the OAA at $66.1 million non-general fund and $76.1 million non-general fund the second year to provide grants, loans, and awards. We've also consolidated all the spending from the Commonwealth Opioid and Abatement Remediation Fund under the OAA for better transparency. We have a total of about $16.4 million non-general fund the first year and $14 million in the second year for these purposes. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, we are moving OAA to be listed under an independent agency as opposed to under the Secretary of Health and Human Resources. And with that, we've completed the report on Health and Human Resources.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we report the Health and Human Resources Subcommittee report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the Health and Human Resources Subcommittee report. Members, please cast your vote. That reports 21. Yes, please. Yeah. 22-0. Thank you. Chairwoman Carr.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as I contemplated my remarks today, I was reminded of Winston Churchill when he said, "It is wonderful what great strides can be made when there is resolute purpose behind them." At the start of this session, Mr. Chairman, you indicated that higher education would be a priority. The subcommittee recommendations reflect your direction and the continued resolute purpose of making our public colleges and universities affordable for Virginia families, accessible for Virginia students, and focused on improving their job opportunities. With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee recommends amendments that include the following: $205.4 million to support affordable access and degree production, $51.1 million for the community colleges to increase by over 19,000 the number of degrees and credentials in high-demand industry sectors across the Commonwealth, $37 million to complete the merger of Old Dominion University and the Eastern Virginia Medical School, $83.2 million for improvements to financial programs and policies, and $10 million for an innovative partnership between our public and private, historically Black colleges and universities, our HBCSs, that will support minority small business, health outcomes for marginalized populations, and increasing access and opportunity for students. In addition, Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee recommends the restoration of $75 million that was provided as part of the 2023 budget actions in Chapter 1 and removed in the introduced budget. The subcommittee also recommends the restoration of $3.1 million for the new College Institute. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee would like to thank you and Delegate Willett for your leadership and support in providing a faculty salary increase for the next 2 years. Higher education remains a labor-intensive enterprise, and these funds, along with our other recommendations, will provide our institutions with the ability to attract and retain talented faculty. Mr. Chairman, details of our subcommittee recommendation are attached. Committee staff will review our report and the attached listing of our recommendations in greater detail, and I hope it will be the pleasure of the committee to adopt them.
On slide 23, Mr. Chairman, as was just pointed out, there's $205 million to increase access, affordability, and degree production. It would help limit the tuition and fee increases for in-state undergraduate students, and this also includes $40 million of funding for our HBCUs. There's the restoration of the $150 million that you provided in operating support in Chapter 1 that was removed in the introduced budget and is now spread back across the institutions. $51.1 million for the community colleges to increase degrees and credentials. There's 3 parts to this. There's some funding for financial aid, there's funding for operating support, and some money for the credential program itself. And it is in 6 key industry sectors, things like healthcare, there's IT and the skilled trades, for example. Andrew will also point out that there's capital money to do upgrades to the facilities for this purpose. The funding to complete the merger at EVMS and Old Dominion. And then lastly on this slide, $22.6 million for institution-specific items. Highlight 2 of them. There's about $5.5 million for the Pauley Heart Center, and then another $4.2 million at James Madison for 2 programs, one to increase the number of nurses and one for teacher prep. In the area of extension, VIMS and the higher ed centers, $13.6 million is going to Virginia State Extension, $10 million of which is that innovative partnership between the public and private HBCUs and the local communities to support minority small business, to improve health outcomes, and also to increase access and opportunity for students. There's $3.6 million for the state match of federal funding. $2.1 million of general fund and $1.5 million of the equipment trust fund would go to Virginia Tech Extension for an integrative agricultural program. And then lastly, $4.9 million at the centers themselves, $3.1 million of which is to restore the new College Institute, which was eliminated in the introduced budget. And then lastly, at the State Council, there is $60 million for financial aid policy changes across the biennium. There's language in Part 4 that provides guidance to SHEV and the institutions to implement these changes. $10 million is financial aid for students that are now eligible for the financial aid under Chapter 107 that you passed in the 2021 Special Session 1. In addition to the $15.5 million that is under the Community College for Workforce Credential Grants, there's another $9.2 million increase for those grants. $6 million for the TAG program to increase the award to $250 each year, as well as a restoration of the policy that you set for online programs being at 50%. $5 million for the innovative internship program. This is also a restoration and implements the program's next phase. And then lastly, $4 million for the stipends under the Military Survivors and Dependents program.
Delegate Carr.
I move that we accept the report of the subcommittee's report on higher education.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the report, the subcommittee report on higher education. Members, please cast your vote. That report's 22-0. Chairman Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. On behalf of the Compensation and Retirement Subcommittee, I'm very pleased to present to you our budget recommendations. This is not only my first session serving on the Appropriations Committee, but also my first year on the subcommittee and as chair. So I'd like to thank the chairman for his support and guidance during this session. As we know, the state and our localities have faced challenges staffing and retaining our workforce. This has been partially a result of the compensation levels being well below those provided in the private sector. The General Assembly has made significant investments in recent years in an effort to address these issues. The budget for the current biennium, the 22-24 biennium, included a 5% raise in both years across all employee groups, as well as significant targeted salary increases for some of our hard-to-staff positions. While we can all be very proud of that work and what it has accomplished, it is vitally important that we continue to build upon these efforts in the upcoming biennium. In the area of employee compensation, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. One of the most significant presentations I think we saw at our subcommittee was from DHRM when they explained the challenges in retaining staff and also in recruiting new staff. The average age of someone entering the state workforce is 37, which is just an incredible number to me. I talked to a 20-something friend who's an economist over the weekend. She said she wants to return to Virginia to work for the state. And I'm like, I'm sending an Uber to you right now. We want you back in Virginia. This year, the work of the subcommittee began with a thorough review of the governor's proposed budget in the employee compensation area. The subcommittee saw the introduced budget, which did not include raises in the first year, instead providing only a 1% bonus and provided limited salary increases in the second year of 1% for state employees and 2% for teachers. This clearly is insufficient, and inflation would negate much of that progress that was made during the last biennium. Based on our guidance and support from you, Mr. Chairman, we've been able to improve that proposal substantially. I am pleased to announce that our subcommittee recommendations, along with those of the K-12 subcommittee you already heard from, include more than $1.2 billion in state employment compensation actions in the 24-26 biennium. As stated in the report of the K-12 subcommittee, this includes approximately $625 million for salary increases for SOQ-funded positions. Our subcommittee recommendations also include approximately $546 million for a 3% increase in each year for our state employees and state-supported local employees. In addition, the subcommittee is recommending $70.6 million over the 2 years in targeted raises. This includes $39.8 million for support staff at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services facilities who did not receive targeted salary increases previously. We'd like to thank these employees for what they do to support some of our most vulnerable citizens. In addition, the funding includes $19 million to support a career progression plan for our correctional officers at the Department of Corrections. In the area of employee benefits, the subcommittee began our session with a thorough review of the recent JLARC study on enhanced retirement and benefits programs. After careful consideration, the subcommittee passed legislation, or proposed legislation to provide these benefits to our conservation officers at the Department of Conservation and Recreation, as well as firefighters from the Department of Military Affairs, and the funding for this expansion is including our recommendations. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the subcommittee for their hard work, and a special thank you from me to Michael Kay from the staff who has helped me through this entire process. And Mr. Chairman, I hope it will be the will of this committee to adopt the subcommittee report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. The details as documented in the speech is that there's 3% each year for the state employees and state-supported local employees. That's about $426 million for the state employees and $118 million for the state-supported local employees. The next slide just shows the targeted salary increases. The largest ones are, again, the support staff at the facilities of Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, as well as the funding for the career progression plan at DOC. This next slide just shows some of the smaller spending items in the recommendations, including legislation that has already passed the House. There are two significant language amendments. One is requiring DHRM to work with the localities to provide a report providing more information on the cost and number of claims related to PTSD, anxiety disorder, and depressive disorder for law enforcement and firefighters. And lastly, there is language in item 1 that requires the staff of the Appropriations Committee and Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee to do an analysis of member reimbursements compared to other legislative bodies.
Joe Willett.
Mr. Chairman, I move adoption of the subcommittee report.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we adopt the report of the It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the report of the Compensation and Retirement Subcommittee. Members, please cast your vote. That report's 22-0. Chair Boulevard.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. The Commerce, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Subcommittee covers a wide range of topics during its budget work every year, and this year was no different. From helping the state to meet its water quality obligations under the Chesapeake Bay Agreement to improving Virginia's portfolio of affordable housing options, our work literally touches on every corner of the Commonwealth. I'd like to take a few moments just to highlight some of the key items included in our subcommittee report. In the area of natural resources, the subcommittee contains a significant investment to enhance the quality of the Commonwealth's water resources and to support our resiliency efforts. To meet the Commonwealth's obligations under the Chesapeake Bay Agreement, the subcommittee report supports the deposit of more than $200 million into the Water Quality Improvement Fund. This investment ensures that we will meet the full needs assessment for agricultural best management practices in the next biennium. And I think, Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that this is the second biennium in a row that we've been able to make this important investment. The subcommittee report also supports further investment into the base funding provided to soil and water conservation districts that will allow them to continue supporting our agricultural community in meeting Virginia's targets for nutrient reductions. The subcommittee report also provides for substantial investments in flood resilience. Most substantially, the subcommittee report provides $200 million over the biennium to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund to support community-scale flood mitigation projects throughout the Commonwealth to ensure our infrastructure is better able to withstand recurrent flooding. Our budget package includes an investment of $187.5 million over the biennium for the Virginia Housing Trust Fund, which helps facilitate the development of affordable housing units across Virginia. We've also capitalized several pilot programs to help improve zoning for housing production, support home ownership for low-income Virginians, and to help residents of manufactured home parks acquire the land on which their homes reside. The subcommittee report includes a one-time $30 million program designed to assist broadband projects that were funded in the Telecommunications Initiative grant round with costs related to make-ready work for aerial broadband deployment. It is our hope, Mr. Chairman, that these resources will help move these projects forward to connect all Virginians to high-speed internet. Our subcommittee report is included with the materials before the committee, and at this time I'll ask staff to review the report in greater detail with the members. I hope it will be the pleasure of the committee to adopt the report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Starting with the Ag and Natural Resources portion of the subcommittee report. Much of this has been seen before. As Delegate Bulova mentioned, more than $200 million is deposited in WQIF in the first year. This is comprised of $138 million from a supplemental general fund deposit, as well as $63 million from the Monsanto settlement agreement. The great bulk of this is directed towards Ag BMP matching grants. $19.2 million is directed to support a number of specific initiatives. There's $3 million in additional base technical assistance funding provided for soil and water conservation districts. And the subcommittee report also reverses a proposed reduction in the WQIF reserve deposit from watercraft fuel tax collections. Major items in DCR include $200 million over the biennium for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. Half of this amount is from the general fund and half is from anticipated revenues from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. $74 million is provided for the City of Norfolk in order to support the Coastal Risk Storm Management Project. And smaller amounts are provided to the Dam Safety Fund, as well as to support Soil and Water Conservation District small dam repairs. Listed here are a number of other smaller items within DCR. I will not read through those, but they're there for the committee's review. In DEQ, major items, there's $50 million to support the City of Richmond's ongoing combined sewer overflow project, $35 million to assist the City of Bristol to support its landfill remediation project, and $20 million in the first year to establish a Pay for Outcomes pilot program targeting non-point source pollution reduction projects within the Bay. There are a number of smaller items listed here within DEQ, the largest of which supports the Recycling Development Center and Fund at $2.5 million per year. A little over $1 million each year is provided to improve the administrative capacity of the department's groundwater and air permitting processes, and a number of smaller items listed here. At DHR, there are a number of specific funding initiatives, the largest of which is $20 million in the first year to support the improvements at semi-quincentennial sites. This includes both historic sites as well as history museums, and would require a 1/3 match from grant recipients. Other natural resources agencies, DWR, the largest amount provided is in the first year to support mussel restoration infrastructure. At VMRC, there's $3.8 million the first year provided as the non-federal share of a Corps of Engineers project at Money Point in the Elizabeth River. Moving on to VDACs, there's $1 million in the first year as a plus up for the APHID fund. There's level funding for the Blue Catfish Infrastructure Grant Program each year, support for coordinated invasive species management, as well as support for the Wildlife Damage Cooperative Program. At the Department of Forestry, there are a few items, the largest of which would support the implementation of House Bill 309. This lists the relevant language amendments within the subcommittee report, the most substantial of which is in the first bullet, which would require the Commonwealth's reentry into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This amendment is included within both HB 29 and HB 30. Up next is Kim.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. One item to mention on this slide for the committee is House Bill 30 provides an additional deposit for the Amazon HQ2 incentives, and this additional deposit will put us over the top in meeting our payment obligation to the company in FY27, which should be about $153 million. A couple items related to incentives and business recruitment to mention on this side. The package before you redistributes $7.5 million to the general fund related to a pier extension for Princess Cruise Lines to dock in Yorktown. And then another item on this slide to point out to the members, it replaces the bill included in House Bill 29 to create the Virginia Sports and Entertainment Authority. It was included in the introduced budget. We've replaced it with the version as it passed the House. Moving on to business-ready sites-related action, the package before the committee creates a $20 million per year base budget for the Virginia Business Ready Sites program, and then it brings total resources to the acquisition fund to $100 million. Delegate Bulova already mentioned this, but for broadband, among some other key initiatives, the subcommittee report invests $30 million in a one-time Make Ready grant program designed to help get projects funded in the FY22 VADI grant round moving forward to help offset some costs related to pole permitting processes and delays. We've included $10 million for a new grant program to retrofit unused space for early childhood needs, but this would be targeted at unused space on our community college campuses, as well as trying to provide access to childcare for state employees. There's language that directs DHCD to award funds to projects that include rooftop solar and canopy parking lot solar from the Industrial Revitalization Fund and the Enterprise Zone Grant Program. And last on this slide capitalizes the Rural EV Charging Network Infrastructure Fund, which was related to a bill that passed out of the House. Couple of key housing related initiatives includes $40 million in the first year of the budget to provide a match to help the City of Newport News secure a federal investment of $400 million to help house U.S. Navy personnel that are docked in the city when a ship is in repair at the shipyard. Delegate Bulova already mentioned the next one. We have provided additional resources over the biennium for the Virginia Housing Trust Fund, totaling just over $37.5 million, which would bring the total trust fund deposits over the biennium to $187.5 million. We are also capitalizing three new grant programs with $5 million each from unused RGGI auction proceeds that are designed to help address the state's housing needs. And finally, David already mentioned that we have some actions related to RGGI included in our subcommittee report. This appropriates $100 million in anticipated RGGI auction proceeds for the programs that are supported by these funds at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Moving on to community-related development investments, would like to point out to the committee that we have included some additional support for the state's planning district commissions. There is, I will not go over this slide in detail, but we've invested $120.5 million in life science related research in our subcommittee report. That total includes operating support for 4 institutions, UVA, Virginia Tech, VCU, and ODU, as well as some equipment support provided that are funded with non-general funds. Tourism, we have directed $6 million of ARPA resources to help Virginia Tourism launch an expanded marketing campaign, and added $5 million for that same authority to help with promotion, public safety, and transportation related needs related to an LPGA related golf tournament that will be hosted in the state later this year. One key item that I'll point out to the committee on this slide, it provides the funding for House Bill 1404 related to small women and minority-owned participation in state contracting. Last, to wrap up, 2 items to point out on this slide. Susan's already mentioned the DMAS-related costs to expanding the state's minimum wage. Our subcommittee report includes the additional cost of that measure for state-supported constitutional officers and state employees, which totals just about $16 million over the biennium. And finally, Mr. Chairman, we have included a language amendment in our subcommittee report that requires VEC to update its 2021 paid and family medical leave study, and that would include an assessment of the budgetary impacts to expanding benefits for state employees, as well as budgetary impacts related to our employees of constitutional officers and local school divisions. And that wraps up our subcommittee report.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of the report from the Subcommittee on Commerce, Agriculture, and Natural Resources.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the report of the Commerce, Agricultural, and Natural Resources Subcommittee. Members, please cast your vote. That report is adopted 22-0. Chairman Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm pleased to present the subcommittee report of the General Government and Capital Outlay. Mr. Chairman, when creating the capital budget, we had a singular focus to continue the House's diligent progress towards addressing the estimated $9 billion in deferred maintenance plaguing our existing state properties. This budget takes a significant step by providing general fund resources totaling more than $1.7 billion to address this need. This includes $587.8 million for 34 priority projects that implement critical improvements, many of which were already in the capital pipeline. This is going to save the Commonwealth millions of dollars from delayed construction timelines. When combined with $400 million in maintenance reserve funds, these improvement projects make great strides in rehabilitating our state facilities in most dire need of repair. This capital budget also includes $400 million for essential upgrades to wastewater treatment plants, ensuring the Commonwealth can continue expedient progress towards Chesapeake Bay watershed goals. When combined with $200 million provided for supplements to previously approved state projects and $107.2 million for equipment and furniture for projects nearing completion, this budget diligently follows through on prior state commitments related to capital improvements. And now, Mr. Chairman, regarding general government, this budget also makes measurable investments in the judicial system, including $33.9 million to raise the payments for court-appointed attorneys and to open a new public defender's office in the Harrisonburg-Rockingham area. Combined, these actions represent a commitment to the House to bolster the accessibility to quality legal representation and justice across the Commonwealth. Finally, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to ask staff to come and provide a more detailed synopsis of the subcommittee report of capital outlay in general government.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For capital outlay, the budget before you follows these main priorities. It prioritizes first addressing the $9 billion that we're facing as a state in deferred maintenance for our facilities. It prudently advances those projects already in the capital pipeline that most of them had planning and are ready to move to construction. And as Delegate Hayes had said, that avoids future cost increases and results in savings. It continues to provide supplements for the construction industry raises that we saw as a result of the pandemic. It's plateaued, but we continue to see cost increases for those projects that were planned and in the pipeline prior to that. Most significantly, the $400 million it has for water quality improvement projects. We have debt in, and we're strategically leveraging the debt to advance these critical initiatives. And finally, the House budget retains legislative prerogative when it comes to capital priorities. This pie chart kind of shows how the funding is split. Of mention, I want to note there is no funding in there that general fund resources for brand new construction. We have renovation and replacement projects in there. Typically, they do replace facilities that are derelict and need to be addressed. As mentioned before, one of the largest pieces in here is the $600 million we provide for supplements. $200 million of that goes to the existing supplement pool. When combined with the $550 million already in, that $750 million you have to address state projects. And another $400 million I mentioned for supplements needed for water quality improvement jobs at wastewater treatment plants. We also retain the $400 million that the House had set last biennium to keep the number high. This helps so that all state-owned properties have a significant and continual influx of cash to go in to retain their standards of quality. I'm not going to go through all the projects on this table, but just as an example, here is a sample of the standalone projects, $24.5 million. Again, these are largely to address deferred maintenance needs. There are two capital pools, same thing, largely renovations, Constructions are one-time addressing of deferred maintenance. The higher ed capital pool has $330 million for 13 projects. Next up, the state agency capital pool, almost $30 million for 6 projects. We do propose planning for additional 9 projects in this budget, again, really prioritizing replacement or renovation of existing facilities in key locations. And finally, the capital budget also includes a little over $100 million for equipment, largely for those projects working through the pipeline. Well, House has really done a great job at pushing through projects recently, so we're providing furniture, fixtures, and equipment for those nearing the end. The budget has debt service savings netting out at about $63 million. I'm sorry, and expenditures that includes savings in the first year. A small amount for land acquisition, new construction, again, only non-general fund. These are typically revenue bonds by higher ed institutions. And then we retain legislative prerogative by not adding additional pressures on how capital funding should be spent. When it comes to general government, just a few things I want to highlight. We have savings of $150 million that was there was funding in the proposed budget for unspecified IT projects. We instead target that towards very specific necessary projects. Within general government, that's $25 million to replace the state's aging tax and revenue system. We have $34.5 million that Delegate Hayes mentioned to address legal representation statewide. We keep $20 million in for the American Revolution Commission. That's in addition to funding under DHR. And there are savings built into the budget from the Compensation Board. The next 2 slides detail tables of additional things in general government there for your reference. We'll go through them today. And with that, sir, I wrap up the presentation for capital outlay in general government.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt the subcommittee report for capital outlay general government.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we adopt the report of the General Government and Capital Outlay Subcommittee. Members, please cast your vote. That report's out, 22-0. Chairman Krizak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On behalf of the Transportation and Public Safety Subcommittee, I'm pleased to present to you our budget recommendations. In the areas of transportation, the subcommittee has continued the practice of limited budget actions to a narrow group of high priority items. The 2024-26 biennial budget includes more than $22.5 billion for the Transportation Secretariat. Nearly all of these funds are distributed using funding formulas established by the Code of Virginia and then allocated to specific projects based on data-driven processes. This practice has and will continue to serve the Commonwealth well. However, as in the recent past, the subcommittee recognizes that there are some projects or issues that are so large and have such a significant impact on the Commonwealth as a whole that direct budget action is warranted. For this reason, the subcommittee is happy to include in its recommendation $70 million in general funds to expedite the widening of I-81 in the Salem area. This $70 million will provide funding to enable the widening of the southbound lanes to occur concurrently with the northbound lanes and therefore saves the Commonwealth about $70 million over the life of the project. Additionally, the subcommittee is pleased to recommend $149.5 million from the general fund over 2 years in increased support for the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. This funding is necessary to address a financial shortfall for WMATA driven largely by the COVID pandemic and the resulting increase in teleworking. This funding will allow us to cover the financial shortfall in the short term while we work with our partners to ensure the system's financial viability in the long run. As you well know, Mr. Chairman, a healthy and vibrant public transit system is vital to the success and continued economic growth of the Washington metropolitan area as a whole and Northern Virginia specifically. Furthermore, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind the committee that approximately 45% of the Commonwealth's tax revenues are derived from Northern Virginia. A healthy and successful WMATA system then benefits Virginia as a whole. Just want to remind you, in the area of public safety, to support our correctional officers, the subcommittee report provides $9.5 million each year to establish a career progression program. This item will provide us with another tool to retain our most qualified officers by allowing them to receive merit-based compensation increases and promotions. The subcommittee report also supports the Commonwealth's efforts to join the growing list of states that have established well-regulated adult-use retail cannabis markets. To this end, the report includes $20 million over the biennium to the Cannabis Control Authority so that they have the resources needed to ensure adults have access to safe, legal products outside the influence of the black market. With that, Mr. Chairman, the report of the subcommittee is now before you and the members of the committee. I hope it will be the committee's pleasure to adopt the subcommittee's report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, again. Starting on slide 68, there's, again, as mentioned in the speech, $65 million the first year and $84.5 million the second year in additional funding for WMATA. There's also the creation of a joint subcommittee to review Northern Virginia public transit. That is in item 1, the General Assembly. For the I-81, there is the recommendation of $70 million in general fund in the first year to support the widening in the Salem area of I-81. There's also language that would override the code and allow a limited exception to allow projects in the I-81 corridor to move forward, even if they're not 100% funded in the 6-year improvement plan. The next slide just shows some other smaller spending amendments, most of which are related to legislation that was enacted during the session. Lastly, there is language amendments, one of which instructs the Commonwealth Transportation Board to transfer up to $90 million over the next 6 years into the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund. There is language changing the threshold by which the cost of a project would have to go to MEI, lowering it from $35 million to $20 million. There's also language allocating $10 million in funding previously provided for the multi-use trails to the Fall Line Trail. Moving to transportation.
Right. Moving on to the public safety and veterans portions of the subcommittee report. At DOC, as Delegate Krizik mentioned, the largest amount is included to establish a career progression program for correctional officers. Funding is also included for changes to restrictive housing and isolated confinement pursuant to House legislation. Additional funding is provided for base operating funding needs within the department. Just over $4 million over the biennium is provided for new and upgraded full body scanners within the department, as well as a number of funding items listed here related to House legislation. At State Police, a total of $11.3 million is provided over the biennium in new spending, the largest of which is $3 million each year for its sworn law enforcement officer compensation plan. At DCJS, a total of $10.7 million is provided over the biennium to continue to backfill reductions in special fund revenues that have been used to support their victim witness as well as other victim programs. $4.7 million is available each year for new SRO incentive grant awards, and a total of $56 million over the biennium is available for grants within the 3 community violence programs listed at the bottom of the slide. A total of $2 million is also provided within DCJS for the initiatives listed within this table. At Veterans Services, the largest item is just over $30 million in the first year to support the operational costs related to starting up the 2 new Veterans Care Centers. $1.4 million is provided over the biennium for the Veterans Fellowship for State Government pilot program. And there are also additional items listed at the bottom of the slide. And finally, there are various language amendments listed throughout the public safety budget. Mr. Chairman, that completes my presentation.
Delegate Krizik.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the subcommittee report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the report of the Transportation and Public Safety Subcommittee. Members, please cast your vote. That is adopted 22-0. Madam Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last here today, you always have to adopt the front page amendment and all the accompanying changes to the resources that were available in the budget. There are just 2 slides here in the PowerPoint for you. I'll highlight just a couple items. Always of interest on the floor, the unappropriated balance at the close of the biennium will be $6 million. In terms of additions to balances that were included in the amendment package, legislative branch of just under $7 million. Changes to transfers, we see a reduction in the ABC profit transfer anticipated in the first year based on year-to-date sales. I believe the others have already been mentioned by staff as we go through, and on the final page, it's the changes to revenues itself. As you indicated in your speech at the beginning, there's the removal of the governor's tax proposals exclusive of the digital economy. That provided an additional $1.3 billion over the biennium for spending. You'll also see reflected revenue changes resulting from legislation passed by the House.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the committee resource and spending adjustments.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the committee resources and spending adjustments. Members, please cast your vote. That is adopted 22-0. Vice Chair Sickles.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass HB 29
Second.
As amended.
as amended.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass HB 29 as amended. Members, please cast your vote. The report's 22-0. Delegate Sickles.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass HB 30 as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass HB 30 as amended. Members, please cast your vote. That report's 22-0. I believe that is all of the business to come before the committee. Committee, thank you very much, public. We thank you very much, staff. We thank you all very much. Committee shall rise.
2-7.